I mentioned in the last video about the huge buildings in Samaria, and obviously they built other buildings all over the place, and they did also build Stonehenge and things like that. And the reason why they done that is because they actually took power from the earth, its resonance. I know it sounds really far-fetched, but it actually works true. The best person to explain all of this in a lot better detail than I can in these short videos is a guy called Michael Tellinger. He is fantastic and explains it so clearly, how they use the earth's resonance to actually create these power grids. So basically the stone statues that and carvings all create what he calls a circuit board around the earth, which obviously we have these ley lines, which makes sense as well. And I'll cover the levitation part of this in the next video. So now we know what the stone structures around the world are for. How did they actually build the stone structures? So it all's to do with the Anunnaki holding this little device in his hand, if you can see there. I'll try and show you a clearer picture here. This is a carving. Yes, they did put heads on. I'll explain that in another video. So it's got tiny little ridges on it. Michael Tellinger will explain how the sound resonance actually works with these. He's done a fantastic job. But basically, it's to do with anti-gravity, and you know they all worship the scarab beetle, and that's because the scarab beetle actually had its wings were anti-gravity. So have a watch of this. Look at that. And that's genuine. That was a guy doing tests. So it's all to do with the sound levitation frequencies. I just thought I'd carry on with the levitation, so people seem to be very intrigued by this. So the underneath of a scarab beetle, which was worshipped way back, the underneath of the wings have got these tiny, millions of these little tiny cones, and these cones are what produce the sound wave. So just like acoustic levitation here, where there's a sound wave that he's got two sound waves there, one pushing up and one pushing down. So these little polystyrene balls are held directly in between the two sound waves. But like you would with a spray gun, if you point that into a point like the cone, you can get a lot more power to it, and that's exactly what the wings do. Monks used to resonate sound with their voices to actually levitate. Just carrying on from the levitation, people really are interested in this. So there was a gentleman many years back called Victor, and I won't pronounce his surname, and he allegedly made a hoverboard using the scarab wings. Now, to move blocks, you need to have a certain type of block, and the pyramids use limestone, and limestone has quartz in it. Quartz has a resonance frequency which is ideal for it to be manipulated and moved. Now, there was a guy called Edward Lee Scullin. He was about 5 foot something, and on his own he created a place called Coral Castle in America. Now, he said that he had the secrets on how they built the pyramids. So the speculation is that he used some sort of sound devices, and some people have said that they saw him levitating these blocks into place, and these blocks were massive. So the Anunnaki tried to wipe out the Nephilim and humans at the same time with the flood. Didn't quite work, and then the Anunnaki agreed that they will let the humans live, and in fact they even started to teach us agriculture, etc. Now, the buildings that the Anunnaki built, a lot of them were on ley lines, and a ley line is a power grid of Earth. So, for example, the Great Pyramid is smack bang on a ley line, right in the middle of one. And you've got other structures such as Stonehenge, you've got, which goes on a ley line, you've got, so many people were talking about it, but also where it doesn't, where it's not on land and the ley line crosses, there are monuments, so still these structures. So, for example, Bermuda Triangle has a pyramid apparently at the bottom of the ocean. So regardless of how the planet was formed, there were still these ley lines that we've got. One such person that knew about these ley lines was Nikola Tesla, and he knew that the Earth could generate power. So he created this tower which would send electricity wirelessly, try saying that a few times, wirelessly across the land. And he actually succeeded in doing this, but his benefactor is the person that was putting in the money was a guy called JP Morgan. You may have heard of him. And he's turned around to Tesla and says, okay, fantastic. How do we monetize this? How do we get money off of the people? You know, how do we know that they're receiving the electricity? And Tesla said, no, it should be free. And JP Morgan said, no, it shouldn't be free. If there's no way to monetize it, we're pulling it down. So the free energy that people do talk about, 0-point modules, etc., are from the Earth's energy. So we're up to what is a pyramid made for if it's not a tomb. I believe pyramids do different things, and this is a great pyramid we're looking at here. And if you remember the video I did on Tesla, which said about the free wireless power that he created, and then you think that the Great Pyramid is smack bang on a ley line, which the energy of the Earth creates a power that goes upwards. The answer is, I'm just using someone's book here, is the pyramid, or the Great Pyramid, is a power plant. Now there's so much documentation out there as to why. I can't actually go into all of that within a minute, but basically it creates a power that's sent out over a vast distance, and it's picked up using these. Now obviously we're unsure exactly what the power's used for. Did they just use it for simple lights, or did they use it for huge devices that they took back with them when they... Just look at this stone, it's absolutely huge. You want to try and move that with pulleys and levers and blocks, and the amount of trees you would need works out to be billions, because of the 20 years, the weight of them, and the trees that are in Egypt. If you was building the Great Pyramid, that were in Egypt, were soft trees, so they would have broke. And anyways, the point that I'm trying to say is, just because you can move a block doesn't mean that's how it was done. So for example, this guy here can actually build Stonehenge on his own. Fantastic, well done, excellent work. So he then says, well, that's it, that's how they built Stonehenge, and probably how they built the Great Pyramids. But just because you can do something or replicate something to get the end result doesn't mean that's how it was done. So for example, there's people out there that recreate UFO footage on their computer, and they say, well, if I done it on my computer, that's how it's done. Doesn't mean that's how it... Is this an ancient doorway? Now we're assuming it's an ancient doorway because it looks like a doorway, but we also assume that things like these holes in these old stone monuments are to do with the stars, because that's all we can figure them out. Look, there's a big stone hole there, and so we're always saying these things are built for astronomical purposes. However, I'm suggesting that whatever was in these holes could have been material that is now long since gone. So for example, these are thousands and thousands of years old, but look, it just takes 50 to 500 years for metals to basically disappear, and plastic. So if there was something in these holes long gone, but so we kind of might need to stop looking at them as if, you know, we know what they are, just because it's a hole and therefore it's got to be pointing to the stars. Maybe we're missing something. Maybe there was something that going through the holes that we've missed. Nikola Tesla did create the free energy as mentioned before, and some people say that it was bumped off at the end. I don't know the answer to that, but we do know that the government people went straight in and took his papers. Some of them was patented, and some of them were just ideas and theories that he'd had that had never been developed. So they took those, so we'll never see the light of day. But people say, well, hang on, why isn't there free energy if the Egyptians did it using my method that I mentioned before? Why is there no one doing it now? Why haven't we got free energy? Well, sadly, there was a lot of people over the years that have managed to do it, improved it, but they mysteriously died. Now you've got to remember that big companies, electric companies, oil companies, all of those stand to lose if these people here manage to get it out to the mainstream. So they won't allow it. Is anyone creating time travel now? Well, there's people out there, such as John Hutchinson. He's got a few videos on YouTube where he can do some amazing things with frequencies. And as you know, I talk about frequencies. So there's a heavy bowling ball being lifted there. Frequencies can open up doorways, can levitate objects, as I've mentioned before. That's John there. And here's something that he can do with a solid bar of metal or iron. He can melt it and disintegrate it within a few seconds. Now just imagine you had, I don't know, 2 massive buildings and you wanted to bring them down quite quickly, and you had this high energy beam that could make it look like these buildings just collapsed on top of each other. That's the technology that can do that. This is a stone structure, a round stone structure in Israel. I won't try and pronounce it. And basically mainstream found some pottery, so they think that they can date it but different dates. So basically they haven't got a clue really, because just because there was a bit of pottery there, it doesn't mean, I mean, I could go to Stonehenge and drop a cup, it doesn't mean it was built yesterday. So let's just have a look at this stone, and that's because the Anunnaki were using these for their power sources. So and it comes from the ley lines under the ground. So look at that, obviously it's worn down terribly, but this is just someone doing an experiment with sound, which would be the frequency that the Earth would be using. Now different frequencies produce different patterns, as you can see here. When the device is turned on, it creates a different pattern each time at a different frequency, and that's exactly what the ley lines do to help create the power. So to keep the Anunnaki powered up, they created these stone circles. Now it's possible that actually they got little humans to move the stones around, these tiny stones. But look at this. This was the one in Israel. Look at that. Just study that for a second. And now here's one in South Africa. You see, you see the similarity there. So if you watch my last video, you'll see the significance of these stone circles. Now, Michael Tellinger has suggested that all ancient, or a lot of the ancient stone structures are actually designed in such a way that it creates a circuit board, and then it can feed power off of a sort of a grid. So in other words, the energy coming up from the Earth creates a power conduit grid that they could then channel the energy off using actually rows of stones. You guys are smart and logical, you'll work this out as I go along. So this is a stone, massive ancient stone in Baalbek, Lebanon, and I say it was the Anunnaki that was taking it and using it as a part of a landing pad for their craft, but it was unfinished. In other words, they didn't take it out. Now have a look at that. Yep, mainstream say that primitive man was doing this. Okay, so here's another one in a different location, another huge stone. Now that little gap there is the width of a person's shoulders. So how do they cut underneath this? Primitive man, how do they cut underneath to take the whole stone up? Now have a look, there's a description here of showing how they do it. But look at the gap, the distance they would need to be able to, they would need equal distance from there to there to be able to push something underneath to cut it. Do you see what I'm saying? Unless it was some sort of laser beam type device. You get what I'm... When the Anunnaki finally landed on what little land there was left after the Great Flood, they assessed the situation. They could see that all their spaceports and buildings are totally submerged now under mud. There was only one landing pad left that wasn't destroyed. And we can see this type of thing that happens. What happens is they have the ancient Anunnaki buildings, and then different civilizations after them build upon them. So for example, this one here, this supposedly was one of the landing pads, the original landing pads. But as the Anunnaki were no longer there, this is built up using different materials, different building styles, and the same goes for this. This supposedly was also another base, but over time Romans or whoever came along and added extra features to it, so they've used the existing Anunnaki architecture. I'm going to tell you why I think we don't have free will. And that's because, for example, back in the 80s, I spoke to clairvoyants, mediums, and heard remote viewers talk about the future, and the near future. And the near future included camps where people will be put in, which is kind of similar to what's happening now. And then they said that after that there'll be a less population and an AI future. In other words, artificial intelligence will be controlling your life. And now when you add the social scoring, etc. Now these are people back in the 80s that's telling the future. Now obviously there's other people out there that can predict the future. So the future's already happened, and now I know people could say, oh, but that's one possible future. But no, how can you say there's one possible future if there's loads? You can't just pick one. That means that one has happened, which means we've already done this before, and your free will was once, but not now. This is already... What is this? It's a mummified scarab beetle. The effort they went through to mummify a little beetle like this. Now, normally we associate the scarab beetle in Egypt with life after death, etc. However, there are other properties. If you watch my previous videos about levitation of the wings of scarab beetles, you'll see there's a possibility that they use that same design to help move the blocks. But here's another example of showing you that these seem to have, and although you'll think this is static, it's not actually static. It's to do with the cones on the inside. Please watch my previous videos to understand more on that. And quick message from fridgedoораlarm.com. This is a place where you can buy a fridge door alarm, and you can set it to however long you want before your fridge door alarm goes off. I know some fridge freezers have them already, but if you don't, you can buy them here. They send to ancient aliens and the way they move their stones and cut them. Now, in the past, people look at these stones, ancient stones with holes cut in them, and think, okay, was it astronomical? It's aligned to something, a star system, or was there a power wire going through that's decomposed now, which is why only the stone is left? And then I come up with an idea that I don't think anyone's come up with. And what if the ancients actually just wanted the core part of it, the cylinder that they actually then create? So we're looking at these thinking, what did they use these holes for? But maybe they just actually wanted a cylinder from a stone, just like this guy did here, and they cut it out. What do you think?